So before we move ahead for a very, very warm welcome and the entire session by you, I'll request Mr. Manoj Agarwal to please come on the frontier and felicitate you with a bouquet. Can we have a huge round of applause for our guest of honor? Thank you so much for joining in, sir. Thank you. A warm welcome. I think I'll request you to please just give a warm welcome to everybody. I'm sure we all want to hear it from you, but just a warm welcome from you.
Well, I'm very grateful for having been given the opportunity of speaking to such a distinguished audience. I will not be technical or statistical. I will just say what I would like to say to an audience such as this. I hope you will bear with me, and I'm really gratified that you have asked me to speak to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Well, I'll give a brief introduction about the guest of honor who have come here. He has over 70 years of expertise and experience in the field of insurance. Well, he started as the clerk in 1952 and finishing up as a founder of life and general insurance company, has been responsible for many, many innovations in the field of insurance and was requested by the government at different times to propose an alternate to sole insurance, which was the Insurance Corporation of Sri Lanka, and subsequently to prepare a white paper for the nationalization of insurance in Sri Lanka. Mr. Scaffter have made several contributions in the field of insurance in Sri Lanka and also has held the office in several bodies connected with the insurer field. Here we have our guest of honor. Can we have a huge round of applause for him, his expertise, his experience in this vast industries, and we are equally delighted to have you here. Thank you so much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is not without a great deal of trepidation that I approach the podium in an effort to speak to you. Choice of a subject is always difficult, and when I have to speak to an august, highly educated assembly such as this, it is even more difficult. So I thought I would speak to you on something which I am reasonably familiar with. The first part of my talk will be about the changing world of insurance in India and Sri Lanka from the early 50s to date. And within that, I will interweave my own experience and my growth in the insurance field. The second part of my talk will be on the Sri Lankan insurance market and prospects for Indian companies. That is primarily what I was asked to talk about. The prospects for them to come to Sri Lanka, not only for insurance, but for other financial services and tourism as well. So let me start at the beginning, and I trust you will have the patience to hear me out. I was born in April 1930, and my father was a lowly schoolmaster. I was orphaned at the age of 11 and was solely dependent upon my relatives, who were themselves poor. My only advantage was that I had free tuition at one of the best schools in Sri Lanka. After I finished my studies in school, I got a job as a clerk in what was then known as the Ceylon Insurance Company, which was the first Sri Lankan company to be set up in 1938. I worked there for 1 year, and from May 1959, at the age of 22, I then joined a Canadian company called Manufacturers Life. It is now known as Manulife. Also, as a clerk, in some sense, life changed for me somewhat, because at that point, my new employers recognized that I had some ability, and within 2 or 3 years, I was made the number 2 in their Colombo branch. After a few years, I had to leave this company and join another company. This was what we commonly know as an agency company managing large tea and rubber estates. they were doing non-life insurance. So I had to change from life insurance to do non-life insurance. So I had to learn it and look after the insurance of over 100 tea estates in Sri Lanka. At this point, I think I should mention some of the more important legislation which affected insurance both in India and Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, life insurance was nationalized in 1962. Non-life insurance was nationalized in 1964. So thereafter, both life and non-life were government-owned. A second insurance corporation, the National Insurance Corporation, was set up in 1980. And they brought back privatization in 1988. In 2001, one of the government companies, the National Insurance Corporation, was sold to the private sector. In India, as most of you will probably know, life insurance was nationalized in 1956 and the LIC was formed. Non-life was nationalized in 1972 and the GIC was formed with its subsidiary companies. Privatization was brought back somewhere, I think, around 2001 after the report of the Malhotra Committee. I believe the IRDA was set up around 1999 when insurance was privatized. Foreign insurance companies were permitted to return to India on strict guidelines. Some of the big ones like Allianz, AIG and Munich Re did come back and are probably still there today. As for myself, at the age of 42, I decided to get on my own. So I left regular salaried employment, which was extremely lucrative, and took the risk of becoming just an ordinary agent, going from insured to insured, door to door, and worked for the Insurance Corporation of Sri Lanka, which was the sole insurer at that time. Several Raj companies, which had their own insurance departments, engaged me to advise them in putting their insurances right. That became a very profitable source of income. I set up an office and my staff increased. In 1979, the Minister of Commerce asked me to give him a plan for setting up an alternate government corporation because there was a great deal of dissatisfaction with the service given by the Sri Lanka Corporation. I provided a plan which involved the setting up of private sector companies which had as principal agents. They would run the business on behalf of the government corporation, issuing policies and settling claims. So the National Insurance Corporation was set up and some big corporates became principal agents. They canvassed for business, they issued policies and settled claims. But everything was done under the control of the National Insurance Corporation, to whom all premiums had to be remitted. The system worked extremely well, and the public were getting private sector treatment, although the company was owned by government. I too was fortunate to be given a principal agency, and that gave me a great fillip to my work. But I had to compete with the mighty corporates, and I was only a one-man show. Again in 1987, the finance minister at that time asked me to provide a plan for privatization of insurance in Sri Lanka. He wanted me to give him a draft of a white paper, which I did, and I was proud to say it was adopted without any alteration whatsoever. The government was moving to privatization in many other areas as well. And so in 1988, Sri Lanka privatized insurance. Simultaneously, principal agencies were done away with, and the broking system was introduced, both for life and non-life insurance. By the early 90s, my own children had grown up, and they began to think of setting up a life insurance company of our own. The other life companies were mighty corporates with a 7-year start. I was a one-man show and 64 years old at the time. With little or no funds and considerable difficulties to meet the reserve requirements, I still set up Janashakthi Life. on 15 September 1994. I had to do all the work on my own to set up the company, and the only outside help I received was from the actuary who calculated the premiums for me. After a few months, we found that several other companies were beginning to think of non-life insurance. And so my family brought up the matter with me. We had a discussion and learned that there were other companies thinking of non-life insurance. So if we delayed, we would find it difficult to get into the field. So I literally took a 5-minute decision to go in for non-life insurance. We didn't have board meetings or discussions. We just decided to go in, and without any projections or figures to back my decision. We had great opposition from our competitors because they were afraid of us. They were afraid that we would take their business. But we managed to obtain the necessary licenses and started business exactly a year later on 15 September 1995. In 2018, we sold Janashakthi General, which had almost 1,000 employees. We had started with 30, to the Allianz Group. And what remains with us is Janashakthi Life. I retired more or less officially from insurance business 10 years ago, a little after I turned 80. The companies are managed by my family. Side by side with giving up my regular employment in 1972, I decided to move to India as well to broaden my area of work. So I took my family there and schooled them there. It was a big risk, but India is a hard country to work in. But I took the chance and moved to India in 1973. It was even more difficult because transfer of funds was difficult. It was not permitted. So though I was earning money in Sri Lanka, I couldn't send it to India. I had to earn in India to educate my family. So I admitted my children in school and looked for consultancy work. There, at that time, general insurance had just been nationalized, and companies were bereft of consultation support because the British companies which had looked after them had to move out. And the Indian companies also couldn't do any business. So there was opportunity for people like me to do consultancy work for the big companies. I did get some work, and perhaps I was one of the earliest to go into consultancy in India. My greatest work in India, however, was on the plantations, because in Sri Lanka I had a great deal of experience in tea factory insurance. So through my friends, I got 1 or 2 recommendations, and once I had done work for them, they recommended me to others. So eventually I had done over 50 tea factories in India. The work I did was to advise them how to put their insurances right, and generally I saved them a lot of money. So in that way, I did work in India for nearly 10 years until my children's education was over. I shut down my Indian operations and went back to Sri Lanka. In 2001, the National Insurance Corporation, which I had set up, went up for sale. We were among the bidders, and we were successful in purchasing it. That gave us a great boost in the insurance market, and people began to take notice of us. Let me now come to the most important part of my talk, which is in regard to the prospects for Indian companies in Sri Lanka. Insurance in Sri Lanka is over 150 years old, and in the days prior to independence, that is 1948, the biggest insurers were the Indian companies and the British companies. It is only after 1986, when insurance was privatized and a regulatory body set up, that insurance companies began to come up in fairly organized, serious manner. For quite some time, there were only 3 companies, apart from the Insurance Corporation of Sri Lanka and the National Insurance Corporation. But gradually other companies came into play, and we now have 15 life companies and 14 non-life companies. 8 of them have common owners. Some of these companies have full or part foreign ownership. They are AIG, Fairfirst, Allianz, LIC. Foreign companies are virtually offshoots. Foreign companies in Sri Lanka are virtually offshoots of their parent companies and are not standalone branches, although the law for certain strict observances has been relaxed for some companies. They are virtual owners of the setup they have in Sri Lanka, the foreign companies, and generally speaking, local companies do not wish to hand over majority control to an overseas company, but those are matters which can always be negotiated. Sri Lankan companies prefer to have majority ownership. The way out may be for the foreign company to get a management contract and run the company, even though they don't have a majority holding. There's a lot of scope for expansion in insurance business in Sri Lanka, as well as for the introduction of more modern methods, including the use of digital technology. All these opportunities are there. The foreign partner could more easily use the Sri Lankan company to spread their wings to other parts of the world. Similarly, there are other financial services such as fund management, finance and leasing, which are very successful. And again, there are opportunities for Indian companies who have the funds to invest. All these companies in Sri Lanka are quite small in comparison with their Indian counterparts. Coming into the market, therefore, will not be a barrier to Indian companies. I do not think the cost will be prohibitive, considering that now the Indian rupee is equal to 3.5 Sri Lankan rupees, because our rates have also gone down. In addition to insurance, there are plenty of opportunities in tourism and fund management and a lot of other financial areas. And I'm sad that Indian entrepreneurs have not thought of looking across the POC state at an area which is just next door to them and offers very good and lucrative opportunities. I have done my best to portray my views, and I must thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Sir, I'll request you to please be on stage. And I'll call upon Mr. Manoj Agarwal to felicitate our guest of honor, Mr. Chandra Scaffter, with a token of memento. Please accept this as a token of memento from us for being present here. Can we have a huge round of applause for our guest of honor, Chandra Scaffter, founder, Janashakthi Insurance, Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for gracing this event and making this memorable, and what an inspiring story too.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate your historical insights and giving the picture about opportunities in Sri Lanka for Indian financial companies. And I think that same applies to financial companies anywhere in the world. India itself is becoming more and more global in its outlook. One thing I must say, sir, I appreciate when I first saw you in person today, you are a really handsome man. Would you all agree?
Yes.
Is he the most handsome man in the room today? Lovely, lovely, sir. Secondly, sir, you remind me of Albert Einstein. Do you agree? Yeah? Albert Einstein was famous for his theory of relativity. Do you have some theory of relativity about insurance or about anything else? Anything in...
Yes, but my relativity to insurance is that it is the only profession I have been in. I value it greatly, and I do my best at all times to live up to its high standards.
Sir, I think you and insurance will be recognized and remembered together for a very long time. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
I'll request both of you to please come to the center stage for a group picture. Yeah.
May I request Ravi Sheshadri to give an epilogue for this session today. Ravi is our jury member and a well-known academician in the insurance sector.
Thank you, Manojji. Good morning, everybody. I'm just to give you two things which none of them have told. Yes, we all talk about insurance. I came to know Muthiah Muralidharan only through him. He was the chairman of actively involved in cricket. If you today talk about Jayasurya, Muthiah Muralidharan, the big names, sir has been. Now that's where I was really inspired. When I went as a faculty, I never thought some cricket person can be handling claims in an insurance company. Muthya Muralidharan was with him, right? So that's one thing which I should share with you. It's amazing. When I went there, 25 years back today, we are talking about digital transformation, etc. I went as a consultant to do a little bit of business process re-engineering. I quit the public sector, and then he gave me an opportunity to get into the international market. And when I went there, he said, Ravi, why don't you come and have a look at our call center? And 23 years back, let me tell you, in Sri Lanka, claims were settled within 24 hours. Amazing claims processing center. And when they sold their general insurance business, of course, they today retain the life insurance business. When they told the general insurance business to Allianz, all of us know Allianz, the person who was heading that particular call center of Janashakthi is the global IT head of Allianz. Thank you, sir, for honoring Banking Frontiers and coming all the way from Colombo. Thank you so much, sir.